They made possible for me to own my very first and probably only ever. In the world of card design, there's a dangerous allure to creating something that's way too powerful. A card so bold, so thrilling, that no one really thought about its consequences. For Magic the Gathering, that temptation came in 1993 and started with a single card. A deceptively simple artifact that would warp tournaments, ignite legal battles, and become the most valuable piece of gaming history ever printed.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!
And that card is, of course, none other than the Black Lotus. To truly understand the story behind the card, we need to travel all the way back to the 90s. Back in 1991, a mathematician known as Richard Garfield pitched a portable card game to a small indie company known as Wizards of the Coast. They wanted a fantasy game, and Richard gave them Magic the Gathering. Its debut set Alpha included 295 cards. Among them were 9 cards so broken they would become iconic. The Power 9. And the most broken of all, of course, is the Black Lotus. A card so overpowered it broke the game's economy as well. So what does Black Lotus actually do? It's simple. For 0 mana, you can tap and sacrifice it to add 3 mana of any color to your mana pool. That might sound simple and not like much, but in a game where mana is everything, it's like hitting the fast forward button. Imagine playing a 5-mana dragon on turn 2, or casting a game-winning spell before your opponent can even draw their second card. In tournaments, Lotus became the ultimate combo enabler. Pair it with Channel to cast a 20-point fireball on turn 1, or use it to power out Time Twister and Ancestral Recall for an unbeatable opening. Even in casual play, Lotus was a game breaker. It didn't just give you an advantage, it was the advantage. But here's the twist. Garfield and his team never intended for Black Lotus to be widely available. During playtesting at the University of Pennsylvania, they assumed players would own just 1 copy, treating it as a rare novelty. They didn't anticipate players stuffing decks with multiple Lotuses, turning matches into lopsided blowouts. The alpha print run was tiny, only 2.6 million cards total, with each rare card appearing once in every 121 packs. For Black Lotus, this meant only 1,100 copies were printed. By the time Wizards released Beta later that year, the demand had exploded. Beta tripled the print run to 7.3 million cards, but even that wasn't enough. By 1994, the Unlimited set, a third print run with 35 million cards, still sold out in months. By 1996, the Power 9, Black Lotus, the 5 Moxen, Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, and Time Twister were banned in nearly all competitive formats. But the damage was done. Black Lotus had already cemented its status as a Hall of Fame legend in trading card games. In 1996, Wizards of the Coast made a decision that would haunt them and the player base for decades: the reserve list. This policy promised players that 572 cards, including the Power 9, would never be reprinted. The goal was to reassure collectors after the Chronicles reprint set crashed the value of cards like City of Brass. Unfortunately for Wizards, the reserve list backfired. New players were priced out of the game while spectators hoarded Black Lotus as investments. By the 2000s, even Wizards' own designers admitted regret. Mark Rosewater, Magic's head designer, called the list a mistake, but reversing it would risk lawsuits. Now this is where it gets really interesting. Legal experts like Scott Peiser argued that the reserve list wasn't a binding contract. It lacked a term called consideration. Now, if you don't know what that means, think of it like a trade. If I promise to give you my Black Lotus card, but only if you give me your Mox Pearl, that's a deal. We both give something up. That's a consideration. But if I just promise to give you my Lotus for free, with no trade, that's not a deal. It's just a promise, and promises aren't always legally binding. That's why the reserve list isn't a contract. It's just Wizards saying we promise not to reprint these cards. No trade, no deal. But under promissory estoppel, which is a rule that says if you make a promise and someone relies on it, you can't just take it back. Imagine your friend promising to give you their Black Lotus card. You get so excited, you sell all your other cards to make room for it. But then your friend says, never mind, I'm keeping it. That's not fair, right? That's exactly why some argued that players could sue Wizards for financial losses if they did reprint Black Lotus. The threat of litigation, combined with the fears of alienating collectors, kept the reserve list intact. Today, the reserve list is a relic of corporate caution. For Black Lotus, it meant one thing: scarcity. With no reprints, the card's value skyrocketed. In 1998, an Alpha Lotus sold for $500. I personally had an opportunity back in the 90s to buy an unlimited Black Lotus for $100. By 2013, that number for an Alpha Black Lotus hit $27,000. In 2019, YouTuber Open Boosters unboxed a beta Black Lotus live on camera, screaming, "Holy boosh!" as 200,000 viewers watched in real time, and that card sold later for $87,000. The most infamous sale came in 2021. An Alpha Black Lotus graded BGS 9.5 shattered records at $511,000. For reference, that's 1,700 times the card's original 1993 value. How could it be that expensive? Well, of the original 1,100 Alpha Lotuses printed, fewer than 50 exist in gem mint condition. Most are locked in vaults or private collections, making them extremely valuable. As prices increased, so did counterfeits. By the 2010s, fake Black Lotuses flooded online marketplaces, some so convincing they fooled seasoned dealers. Collectors developed different forensic-level authentication methods. One of them is the bend test, which assumes that authentic Magic cards flex without creasing because of their layered cardboard core. Meanwhile, the fake ones will crack under pressure. Mesa Falcon? But is it a real Mesa Falcon? The bend test requires that you actually fold it until the corners touch. Can you imagine doing that with an Alpha Black Lotus worth tens of thousands or more dollars? In 2012, a dealer named Bill Mastro admitted to trimming the edges of a T206 Honus Wagner baseball card to boost its grade, a scheme that shook the collectibles world and raised questions about Magic's own authentication process. All in all, Lotus is part of a broader obsession with rarity, a phenomenon economists call Veblen goods, items that gain value because they're expensive. Think Picasso paintings, Honus Wagner baseball cards, or the inverted Jenny stamp, and now a children's card game. To be fair, Black Lotus is unique. Unlike art or stamps, it was never meant to be valuable. It was more like a mistake, a design oversight that became a cultural icon. For Magic's 30 million players, it shows the game's wild and unrelegated infancy. As prices climb, fewer fans can ever own a Lotus. Yet for those who own one, it's a trophy that will stay with you forever. At this point, the Lotus's price had grown to as much as a car, and I really thought that it was out of my range. Then my content creation business really took off, and I created long-lasting relationships with a sponsor of mine, CoolStuffInc.com. Just recently, they made a deal with me to put a lot of my sponsorship income that I would get for the next year towards a certain card. And they made possible for me to own my very first and probably only ever Black Lotus, a graded Beckett 9 mint Black Lotus. And I now can say that the childhood dream has come true. It's insane. It's crazy. I feel silly most of the time for having it, but I love it. It is everything Magic to me.